a second. There goes. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in this evening. My name is Elizabeth, the Education Coordinator for Marlene's Market and Deli. Tonight's special guest that we have with us is Isaac Ho. He is the founder and one of the amazing coaches and members at Beometry. Locally here in Tacoma, Washington. And it's always a pleasure to have him or one of his wonderful colleagues tune in with us on our virtual platform. So we thank you for everyone who's tuning in. And Isaac, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Elizabeth. It's always wonderful. First of all, I want to welcome everyone who really took the energy and the time to be here. And I'm not sure what you're experiencing or why you're here. And if you would, I'd love you to just enter in the chat what you'd love to get out of today. I often teach to health professionals. That's actually most of who I get to teach to. So for me, this is super exciting because I love, and the whole reason I got into personal training and health and fitness and became a therapist and a coach was really to help people that a lot of this information was really hard for me to find, that I could not find solutions for my problems. And I find it's not available in many places at all. And so if there's something that you would love to get out of today, I invite you to type that into the chat. And it's really just there so I can maybe cater this a little bit to what you'd like to get out of it. What we're really going to talk about today is about the imbalances that create problems for the body. And a little bit of background about me, just so you have some relativity, is I grew up, my dad was a medical doctor. And so my dad was a family practice physician, which he always jokes means that you are a jack of all trades and master of none. You could have anyone come to you any day and have no idea what they need. And you take a very broad body of knowledge and you try to figure out, where do I send this person or what do I do with this person? And so I grew up in a household where medication was very, very common. And nutrition, interestingly enough, was maybe not. Now, the first time I realized, and if you're watching this, and I think it's about 4 imbalances that move you out of chronic pain, is that you may have an experience in your life where you realize, wow, my body is different. I have a different experience in my body. I do not like this experience, and it leaves a memory with you. And I remember my first memory of this was my dad was doing a continued education CME in Chicago. And there are some great malls in Chicago. So of course, my dad's in class all day. My mom takes me and my brother out. And I'm like 4, 5 years old, but this is how traumatic this memory is for me. We're walking around the mall. I'm having these beautiful times seeing all this shiny new beautiful things. And we stop and we have a snack. And my mom, my brother, who's 12 months older than me, we share one cinnamon roll, the Cinnabon. And all of a sudden, I'm having raging diarrhea. I'm pooping in the middle of the mall. My mom doesn't know what to do. She goes to Sears and we buy new underwear. And all I do is I just destroy those underwear. And now it's like I'm super embarrassed. I don't know what's happening. It's scary. And we have to go home. We have to go back to the apartment. And that was the end of the day. And that was really my first memory with, man, there's something wrong with me. Now, interestingly enough, I had that happen, but it's not like we did anything about that. It's just like, oh, it was a bad cinnamon roll. Now, as an adult, I look back at that and I go, it's really interesting that 2 people ate the same thing, but I was the only one that had an issue with it. And most people don't have any idea at all how to recognize a health problem. And this is my mom and my dad, who my dad was a family practice physician, and they did not even see this. Now, my problems continued on after that, and they really continued with that GI issue becoming a body weight issue. So my brother and I, 12 months apart, best friends growing up, we ate the same thing every day. What was really interesting is my brother was really, really lean, like always had visible abs, and I just got heavier and heavier and heavier. So by the time I was 8 years old, I weighed 155 pounds, to give you an idea. Okay, to give you a contrast to that, like what is kind of normal for a male is once I actually learned some things about health, I actually exited high school and I weighed the exact same weight. But that required me learning a few things. But 155 is very heavy for an 8-year-old in 3rd grade. Now, not only did I notice that I was heavier, but I had this really hard experience in my body. I didn't think much about it, but I remember being in PE, and you sit there as a kid, and you sit there on the floor and you listen to your PE teacher. I don't know if any of you ever remember that. Old school PE, sit on the floor, basketball court, telling you what to do. And I'm sitting there and the back of my legs are killing me. My knees are killing me. My back is killing me. Hurts me to sit in class. And I'm like, what is going on with me? And as we start to actually do PE, I realize, wow, my chest hurts when I run. I cannot do any push-ups, any pull-ups. I have back pain. And that was my experience of life growing up at the age of 8. By the time I got into the 7th grade, I had to make a decision because at that point, I'd been in this experience and I knew for sure a couple things. One, I did not feel confident that I was going to have a great quality of life. But the bigger thing is I did not want to continue being ashamed emotionally of myself. And there were the hardest thing for me was in Washington. And if you live in Washington and you're live streaming this and you're local, is we have some gorgeous summer days and we have a lot of not so gorgeous days. And on the gorgeous summer days, I had in my heart this desire to really enjoy this day, to actually feel the sun on my skin, to actually take off the clothes that I was wearing so I could feel my t-shirt underneath. But the problem I had was my stomach was so big, I was really ashamed of it. I felt really embarrassed. I didn't want anyone to see that I had man boobs and that I had a big stomach. And so I kept myself covered in thick clothes the whole year round. And I would sweat no matter how beautiful it was. And I remember the pain of that in coming to a decision where I decided, okay, I don't want to live like this. I do not want to go into high school like this. If I continue on this path, it's going to be a situation where I'm probably not going to want to be around very long. And what I decided to do was to do what I needed to do to be healthy. And I made a decision. Now, here's the interesting thing is you think that my parents, being fairly educated, that they would have fed us really healthy food, that they would have known about exercise. But we actually ate a lot of really poor quality food. We ate a lot of very cheap food. And a lot of that came from a background of my parents are immigrants. And when they didn't grow up with a lot of money, even though they made money, they went for what was really the most convenient and also what was the least expensive. So we ate a lot of fried chicken, Albertson's fried chicken, a lot of Tombstone pizzas, anything that was fast, easy, and lots of it for a family of 5. And what it required for me to actually change my situation is I had to actually learn a little bit about nutrition and say, I'm not going to eat these things that my parents are giving me. I remember it really only took me a little bit of time, maybe a month or two, but I implemented some really basic exercise. I did some research. This was before the internet, okay? So it means the only information I really had was what was available at a magazine stand. So I actually went to a magazine stand, picked up a Men's Health summer magazine, and I read that information, I applied that information, and it completely changed my life. That's when I lost about 15 pounds in a few weeks. When I went back to school, no one recognized me anymore because they were used to the larger version of myself that'd been within school for about 6 years. And I felt this incredible magic of transformation. And I fell in love with that transformation. And I'm going to let this person in real quick. And I'm sharing this with you because the transformation of what it feels like to change your life is something that I've dedicated my life to. And I ran into a few issues along the way that I'm really going to talk about here. So obviously this is a story about me being a young boy. And when you're younger, things tend to work better. So of course I became a trainer at 17 years old and started to have clients and realized that their body did not respond as well as my body. They had different problems. And that's really what I'm going to teach you about today is we all want this transformation of, I want to be healthy. At the end of the day, I want to feel super good about myself inside and out. I want to feel like I can accept myself. And when people see me, there's this new version of me because who I love inside matches who is coming out now. But how do we get there? That's the difficult part. And it's not as simple as we eat better and we exercise. So let me share some of the problems that I had. And if you've had some of these issues, you are welcome to either raise your hand and go, yes, that's something that I have felt inside me. Or you can type into the chat room, yep, that's totally me. So the first thing that I ran into as a personal trainer is we gave people these exercises. And like, this exercise is solid. People lose weight if they do this exercise. Well, guess what? They ended up having pain. So 2 people do the same exercise. One person, their back hurts. Another person, their knee hurts. A third person, their neck hurts. A fourth person, their shoulder hurts. Now, we're looking at the alignment of this person and we go, oh, it's pretty good. I really don't know why it hurts. And I would think if I started 2 people that at the exact same time, they wouldn't have any of these problems. And I would send these people to physical therapy. course, because that's usually what happens. Hey, Isaac, my shoulder hurts so bad. I'm going to go to physical therapy for a few months. I'll see you when I get done. And I would go, okay, awesome. I'll see you when you get done. And I would never hear from that person again. So I would go, man, I really wonder what happened to Brian. So I'd call Brian and I'd say, Brian, where you at, man? He goes, my shoulder is so bad that I cannot exercise anymore. And I would say, well, didn't you go to physical therapy? He goes, yeah, it's still busted. And I would go, wow, here's someone who carved out the time to come into the gym at 7 p.m. at night after a long work day. They invested money to get better, and they went through the system and they're not better. And I would feel the sadness inside me because the transformation for that person wasn't given. And that was the thing that really had me questioning about what I was doing. I said, is the thing I'm doing, yes, it's valuable. I think it's valuable, but it's only valuable if someone can receive it. So what do I do if someone has something going on in their body where they can't receive it? Now, that wasn't the first red flag I had working with clients. And I've been working with clients now for 16 years. So within the first 5 years, I started seeing some other interesting things. And you can also maybe self-identify with some of these. And I really felt it the first time when I had a breakup with my girlfriend. And there was this huge sadness in me. And it was interesting because I went from being really healthy and feeling like everything was going really well to all of a sudden having this really big emotional thing happen in this relationship and then getting mono. And I got mono and then I was sick and then I lost all this lean muscle mass. And then it's like something was wrong with my lungs, something was wrong with my throat. I had an infection, I couldn't fight it. I did rounds of antibiotics and I just kind of stayed chronically gassed. And I would see this with clients as well, that something emotional would happen. I'll never forget one lady that I worked with, and we did some exercise, and she was super sweet. And there was an interesting situation where she would make little comments to me about her family life. And I thought, not too much about it. Everyone has things going on. And then one day she came in and she said, I just found out that my husband is leaving me and all my kids, and he has a whole nother family that he's been keeping. And this client got so depressed. She spent all her time in the gym. She didn't eat anymore, and the skin literally sagged off her body. And people would come to me and they would say, you are doing such a great job training her. She's lost so much weight. And I would look at them like, are you crazy? This is someone who's depressed. This is someone who has nothing else to live for and walks themselves to death on the treadmill. This is someone who hasn't eaten in weeks, who's malnourished. And I saw all these issues in the emotional spirit of a person. And I saw this issue in the physical spirit of a person. Now, the first one that felt easiest for me to try to figure out was first the physical body. So I went, well, there's physical therapists and there's chiropractors and there's all these surgeons that teach courses. I will go and I will study all these courses. So I went and I flew around the world and I studied with all these people who specialized in physical kinds of treatments. And what I ran into was an interesting thing where someone said, I remember never forgetting this, where they said, if you're a trainer and you have somebody with any kind of neck issue, you need to refer them out because you're not going to be able to help them. And one of the primary reasons is if you don't have any ability to lay hands on them, you're not a therapist, you're not going to be able to help their problem. And I thought, wow, that is great. But how many of my clients have neck issues? I didn't see any that didn't. So then I went, oh, I'm going to refer them out and have the same problem that I did. So that inspired me to go back to school and become a therapist so I could figure out how to help people with manual therapy. And I did that. And I got really, really well-versed in manual therapy. I studied with some of the best people I could around the world. I studied in France. I studied with neurosurgeons. I studied with osteopaths in New Zealand. And I learned all these manual techniques. And I found there was still something kind of off about the body. And what I kept asking myself is if I just did that technique, why do they have that in the first place? Okay. And we're going to talk about these four imbalances and you'll have a lot of clarity. And I'm going to share stories with you about case studies of real people that I've worked with and solutions that worked and what they actually needed. But what you want to understand is that your human body is super, super intelligent, very intelligent. And so one of the things about the human body is that there is a culture in Eastern medicine and like attracts like. So anytime you have one kind of problem, you will have another kind of problem in the body. And that can exist in multiple planes inside of someone's existence. So pain is always followed by similar situations inside of that pain body. So let's talk a little bit about what started to happen. So I'm doing these techniques on people and they're feeling better. Now, interestingly enough, if you ever worked with the exercise group, most people, I'm just going to let some more people in, most people, when they have something that hurts, you either try to do two things. So the first one that you can try is you work around it or you modify it. And the second thing you can do is that you can try to push through it. Okay. Now, most people, they try to push through it. And then when it becomes too painful, they go, okay, maybe I'll listen to this and I'll modify it. And I had the very best friend of mine. Her name was Melissa, and she was a personal trainer. She was a personal training instructor, very knowledgeable life coach, very well established in terms of intellectual. She actually went to Georgetown and Stanford. So a very, very intelligent person. And I ran into an issue with her. Well, one day, all of a sudden her neck started hurting and it turned into nausea, which then turned into spasms, which got worse and worse and worse. And at that point, I went, well, this is a great example of taking the manual therapy and seeing what we can do. And I actually had, I sent her, I referred her out to the top level manual therapist that I was studying with. And she got sicker and sicker and sicker to a point where she could barely operate in her life. And she was a very dear friend of mine. I was very confused. And at first I did what we were talking about earlier, which I went, I'm going to modify all the movements for her and see what we can still get done. And the pain would move from her neck into her elbow, into her hand, into weird places. I got to a point where I said, we're not going to modify anything. I think you just need healing. So when she went and saw these healers, came back, there was really no progress with that. Now, I'm going to skip ahead. Unfortunately, Melissa was only in her 30s, but she ended up passing away. So one day I didn't hear from Melissa for about 2 days, and we were really good friends. So we texted all the time. And I thought maybe she just needed some alone time. So I texted her and I said, hey, if I don't hear from you, I'm just worried about you. I'm going to come by your house. Just make sure you're okay. And when I pulled up to the house, because I didn't hear from her, her lights were on, her car was outside. And what happened was I ended up having to call the police and her parents. The police went in and they found her deceased in her bathroom. And she was very young. She had seen lots of doctors. They came to a general consensus that she needed to lose weight, but how could she lose weight? Because everything hurt her. It was this huge cycle. I lived with her. She was a roommate of mine for multiple years, and I never met anyone who ate healthier food than her. And she was allergic to every single food under the sun. How could that be? Now, this was very curious for me and also very depressing because the thing that I really wanted to do was to help people heal. And if I could not help my best friend heal and she passed away, I really didn't know what I was doing. And the thing that really was curious to me is why she died. So, and this was, it took me years to figure this out, but essentially I got an autopsy report from her family about what they found. And they found an enlarged heart, they found a fatty liver, and they found that she had actually acquired an undiagnosed form of type 1.5 diabetes, which essentially means that you develop the inability to process insulin. So think about trying to lose weight with that undiagnosed and you cannot pull blood sugar incorrectly. You keep on having hormonal problems and you keep on having neurological problems until the whole system shuts down, which is what happened to her. And she actually passed out, hit her head on the toilet, and passed by herself from hemorrhage in the brain. So I went, wow, there are some big things that a lot of people are missing. And the more I started to understand this, the more it's going to get into these four imbalances. But there are quite a few things that my journey has really led me on. And I had my son. I have a son. He's 3 years old, and I ended up going on my own journey with being a parent. And one of the things that happened was my son had some GI issues when he was born, and he didn't sleep for about 2 years. And so for about 2 years, I didn't sleep, and it created a lot of issues for me in my body. And then I had to go and learn to heal those issues. But I had really interesting things, like I would bloat after I ate anything, like the kind of bloating where your pants don't fit anymore. I would bloat so bad that my back would hurt. Like I could lift weights, but the bloating was so much pressure, my back would hurt more than from lifting weights. I developed a really bad knee issue to a point where I couldn't even bend down to get in the refrigerator and get food out. And I'm a personal trainer and I know these things and I'm a manual therapist and I'm like, what is going on? And this is really going to tie into the four imbalances that we're going to talk about here. Now, I'm just going to see there's a note here and talking about lupus pain. And yes, well, thank you. Is that your message? Okay, perfect. Okay. So excellent. So let's talk a little bit about let's talk about one of the first things that I started seeing. And so one of the first things I started seeing was I studied something, and this is the first imbalance in the body that I think is the most important of all the imbalances. And it's understanding what's called bioenergy. So all bioenergy is if the electrician comes to your house, one of the things they got to figure out is which wires are hot and which wires aren't working. And they have a device for that. They can click it onto your wire, they can read it, they can see what's coming out of it. So that's called bioenergy. You can write that down. Now, all that means is that the energy for a person, the biological energy that keeps them alive, that exists and it's actually measurable. Okay. Now, bioenergy is a very interesting concept because you have to realize that everything has a bioenergy impedance. So I remember my friend Melissa, okay, the one I was telling you about who passed, at the point I was doing different therapies on her. And the most successful I got with her was I gave her a certain color gram. And the color gram was from France, and it used things from the I Ching, and it used color therapy, and it basically calculated a specific one for, and I said, based off this measurement, if you put this a specific way, it will keep you from a certain resonance that you're incompatible with. And it was really interesting because she had some emotional things. There were certain people that when she was around, she would feel super drained and sick for days. And when she put up that acnogram, she wasn't sick anymore. Very interesting. And I went, oh, okay, there's something to this emotional issue. I had a lady that had a really bad back. Okay, her name was Amanda. And Amanda's back was so bad that she couldn't go down the one stair in her living room. So you remember these old houses built in the 90s? Sometimes I don't know why, they just have a drop. Just one stair in the living room. Her back was so bad she couldn't step down it without being in excruciating pain to a point where she would drop her baby. And I would treat this, but I went, let me measure some things with her bioenergy and see. And I would go through certain topics, and I found that there were some stressors for her specifically around work. And this was really interesting. So when I dived in a little bit with her, I realized one, that her and her boss did not get along well, that she felt like she needed to get her boss's approval, that she really wanted her boss to like her. Two, she was also making about $30,000 a year, which, you know, it wasn't so much of a money thing for her, but from an internal value of what she felt like she was worth, that was really challenging for her. And it validated a certain belief that she had. So Amanda and I started doing some coaching work together. I said, I wonder how effective it is to pick these things up in the body, but actually treat them from a coaching perspective and see what happens. So we started that together. And by the end of about 6 months, Amanda was pain-free and she was having her second child. That's how healthy she got. Now, her first child, she had to have really specific situations to be able to conceive that first child. Her second child, she needed nothing for. So that just gives you an idea of how healthy her hormones were. Not only did she have more health and not have back pain, but she actually made $90,000 at the new job, 96,000 to be specific. So she tripled her income. So there were some really specific things that were happening in her energy and in her belief systems that were keeping her in pain. So the first area that I really started to look at people was, okay, like from a bioenergy standpoint, I could give you all these supplements. I could do all this acupuncture on you, which is bioenergy. I could do all this color therapy on you. But the real issue you're going to have in your life is you're actually not compatible with some of the things in your life, and those need to change if you're going to be healthy. So that's really where I started. So the first imbalance, if you want to write this down, the first imbalance people will have is they have something in their bioenergy that does not work. Now, a lot of times, we're going to go into this a little bit, they can be beliefs. Okay, now what is a belief? A belief is just something that you have to validate in your experience to be true about you, life, or someone or something else. That is it. So anytime we are challenged in our life with finance, anytime we are challenged in our life with relationship, we have a certain belief. Now that certain belief runs at a certain bioenergy, which means it causes certain problems in the body. It also causes certain situations in terms of the areas it will affect in the body. Okay, so for example, if you understand Eastern medicine, liver is related to anger. So many times people with anger issues will have liver issues, okay? The other coordination you can think about is like gallbladder is related to the front of the shoulders. So that means if you are bitter about something, which is the emotion of gallbladder, you will have front shoulder pain, okay? Now, sometimes this doesn't look like pain. Sometimes it can look like weakness. Sometimes it can look like organ dysfunction, but there is usually a belief that stimulates them having that issue in the first place. So it's a bioenergy issue, but it will manifest as a belief problem that manifests in the body as a symptomatic problem. and you cannot change those without addressing the belief. So that is the biggest imbalance that we're going to start with. Now, everyone's going to need some of these imbalances in a different order. So for example, I'm going to show you like the 4 categories, but you have to peel these back a certain way. Okay. And here's why you have to peel these back a certain way. Okay. So if I had an original compensation and I started here and I twisted, in order to maintain that position, I would have to build up thicker muscles to pull me that way. Then I would have a secondary compensation to sit that way. I'd have to build up a third layer of thicker muscle to hold me in that position because I've been compensating on top of compensation on top of compensation. So by the time someone comes in and they have an emotional trauma, it's going to stack with a physical body problem. It's going to stack with some of the other imbalances that we're going to talk about. But you can't go into the core and pull it all out because the person, they have all these superficial layers of compensation that are compressive. And so you have to do these in a certain order. So the reason I'm saying that is it doesn't mean like you go and you meditate and all these things all of a sudden go away. It can be helpful, but we have to really understand like what is happening and how do we implement some of these strategies if we're going to get better. So first thing is the bioenergy, which is going to mean there's a belief, there's an emotion, there is an energy to that belief. And in Eastern medicine, they track that all the time, but you can track it with a lot of different things. There are 100 ways to get to the same answer. Okay, so you can look something up on YouTube, you go to Google, you can find a book. There are lots of different answers, but to distill it simply as you can is you have to make certain changes in your life. And you have to remember that everything you have in your life right now represents the energy that you're in, which means like attracts like. So anytime you do not have something that you like, you have to be very conscious about what you're doing. And by the way, I've used this with people that have addiction to substances. I've used this with people that have addictions to relationships, and it works. But you have to remember that like attracts like. So you have to be very careful about where you get your input in terms of what you want to change. So that is the first. Now, let's talk about the second imbalance, okay? So the second imbalance really is very interesting because it is the physical imbalance. So I had a gentleman, his name was Bruce, and Bruce was referred to me by someone that I had treated and worked on that had really good results. Now, the interesting thing about Bruce is he was in a really bad car accident when he was about 16 or 18. And ever since then, his back wasn't the same. So he had back surgeries, he had tried all these things, and he was in his 30s and at a point where he owned a construction company, but he could barely get out of his truck. So he felt like he was this boss who told everyone what to do, but his back was so bad, he could barely go home and not yell at his children because he would hurt so bad. He didn't want to be that person, but this is a limitation of the physical body. So the physical body. So what do we need to think about when it comes to balancing the physical body? So what we want to think about is all trauma is like parking a car on top of a hose. So if the body is supposed to pump fluids in that are new and rejuvenating and pump old waste out, it can only do that if the hose does not have pressure. So different kinds of traumas leave different size pressures. So if you have like a little bit, you walk on, let's say you're at Marlene and you step off the curb and you kind of twist your ankle a little bit, okay, that could create some pressure on a vessel. And that pressure might be like the size of a tire bicycle, okay? So you still get some flow, there's still some function. It's limited, it maybe doesn't feel great, but you can go on. Then you have bigger pressures, like for example, let's take whiplash. So you're in a car, you're driving, your head's turned a certain way, boom, you get hit, your head whips, you get a protective reflex, all the muscles tighten your head so your spine doesn't go flying, your brain doesn't go jostling, and that is a completely different kind of pressure. It's an increased amount of pressure, and that is going to strain different kinds of connective tissue in the body. Okay, so you have the physical tensions. So you would have to deload these tensions. So what does deload these tensions mean? So give an example. Inside the body, you have different kinds of connective tissue. So just to name a few, like the bone itself, you may not know this, or you may, has a blood supply. That's how the bone stays alive. Then the blood supply of the tissues in the hand, those are more, we call those superficial, those have their own blood supply. Now, if I don't know if you've ever seen someone do lots of curls, okay, to a point where they cannot straighten their elbow anymore. What happened? Why can't they straighten their elbow anymore? So this superficial blood supply to the bicep got exhausted. It had to ask a deeper structure to help it against that stress. And then the blood supply inside the bone actually bends to protect the bone and the blood supply inside it. And then that person loses the ability to straighten their arm. Okay, so that would be a protective reflex. So that is an example of one kind of strain. So you can have strains almost anywhere in the body and any different system. So this guy who owns the construction company, he has a lot of physical strains because he was in a car accident, he had multiple surgeries, and then he's been in construction and he tried to tough it out. So by the time he reaches me and he's feeling this way and he's got all these pain signals coming in, he really cannot do too much and he doesn't have a lot of options, because the only way we're going to get him better is to untie these spasms in a particular way. And we did that, and now he has no more pain and he can work full-time in his construction company and it's taken off for him. See, but that was not necessarily an emotional problem. It's not a bioenergy problem. That would be a physical problem. Now, what happens when you solve one problem? Well, you create another problem, okay? Now, the other problem is always there. You just can't deal with it, okay? Because you have a more baseline survival mechanism you need to meet first. So that means if you're in pain all the time and you're tight, you're probably not going to think a lot about going on vacation, thriving, and running a business that is multiple 7 figures a year. It's probably going to feel like too much. You just want to go home, lay on the couch, and have some peace. And so then we started seeing other bioenergy problems after that wasn't a problem, okay? So you want to think, okay, I could have a bioenergy problem, I could have a physical problem. Now, let's look at the third problem that sometimes manifests in the imbalance. Now, this is an interesting one because it dances through multiple realms. This is called a chemical problem, okay? So a chemical problem is going to be something that is not respecting A, laws of bioenergy, B, that person's unique metabolic response, which basically means what their body needs in order to function well. And because of that, they have issues with infections, okay? So you have infections and you have enzymes that aren't created. So you may have heard of things like yeast. You may have heard of things like candida, parasites, ringworm, negative gram bacteria, H. pylori, staphylococcus infections. Okay, so you have all these categories of infections. So, and I'm going to share with you something that's really interesting. Okay, so there are certain kind of infections that bring liver enzymes down. They will be low in a blood panel, and you have certain kind of infections that will bring liver enzymes up in an infection. Okay, now each of these kind of neurotoxicity poisoning from these infections, they will actually create different kinds of mental conditions. Okay, you got to think, if I'm exposed to high levels of, let's say, ethanol poisoning from yeast and candida, it's going to make me very, very reliant on dopamine. Okay, which means I need something to feel good all the time. And this can be people that are constantly on Facebook or social media and they need all this approval to feel good about themselves, or it can be somebody that wants everyone to know all the time what they did, or it's someone that needs to go shopping every day so they can ride this really wicked high and low. Okay, so you can think, oh, that looks like a mental problem. Absolutely can be, but you have to remember that the brain will never be healthier than the blood that it swims in. Okay, so then you have a kind of infection, a chemical problem that then feeds a neurological problem or a personality behavior disorder. Okay, so let's just rewind a little. If you remember my friend Melissa, they found this increased fatty liver on her. Very interesting. She also dealt with skin conditions, and she also dealt with seizures, random seizures, okay, which means there's a neurological issue to the brain. So she had infections that were undiagnosed, and there's a specific kind of negative gram bacteria, and it creates what's called LPS exposure, okay? And if you think about this, you're like, man, I'm watching this, and this is a lot of information. LPS, you can look it up, okay? It actually damages the pancreas to a point where people become diabetic. And so you could become type 1.5 diabetic from long periods of LPS exposure. Okay, so now you see how this is connecting. So there's an emotional bioenergy problem, there's a chemical problem. Those are the priorities in that situation versus the other person, the construction owner, priority was the physical problem, and then the secondary was the bioenergy problem. Okay, now another thing to keep in mind too, when the bioenergy is off, okay, the bioenergy is off, your entire energy field, 10% of that energy field is designed to feed your immune system. So you use 10% of your energy to actually repel problems for your body. So this is really interesting. Like, I was in a class the other week and one of the people there ended up getting COVID. Okay, and they found out later, they emailed everyone, but I didn't get COVID. Some other people didn't get COVID. We were all exposed to the same person. Okay, so what's going on there? Well, part of that is going to depend on how well the immune system is functioning. The response, is it low? Is it high? But it's also going to depend on how the state of the bioenergy is, if that person is going to be chronically ill, immunosuppressed, or maybe even hyperactive. Okay. There was a time of my life when I first started learning about viral and bacterial infections, really from a treatment standpoint, where I got chronic strep and could not talk for almost 3 months. And they gave me rounds of antibiotics. They thought, okay, we're going to take out Isaac's tonsils, all these things. Now, what was I really doing in my life at that time? I was hitting the oil hard because I had just done a Tony Robbins seminar. I felt fantastic. I had all these new things to implement my business, and I was waking up really early and I was pushing it. And guess what? I maxed out my bioenergy availability, and the bacteria in my system was able to become too strong. Okay, so sometimes you can get these chemical problems from having a bioenergy problem. But once you have the chemical problem, you will need to deal with it from a chemistry level. So an example of this, someone who needs this primarily, is there is a psychologist that I work with, and she specializes in long COVID treatment. And she, ironically, why she does that is she's had a really hard time with long COVID. And her medication list is like that long, and she's obviously done a lot of mental work on it because she's a psychiatrist. Now, what's happening here is we look at what she's eating, we look at her blood tests, we look at her stool samples, and we realize something that, one, yes, there's certain strands of bacteria that actually they deplete when you get COVID. And what happens then is you start having issues with inflammation afterwards, especially if you don't have things to balance them. And so her main issue was really around the chemistry. Now, we did some really simple things, and I'll just tell you how fast these things can happen, is that she has a heart rate variability program. So if you don't know what a heart rate variability is, it is this kind of fancy heart rate monitoring software, and it basically looks at how well your heart can recover from stress through the day. And it will give you different zones that'll say, okay, you didn't recover that well, I think you should take it easy today. Versus, hey, you're actually having a pretty good heart day, we could maybe push you a little bit harder. And some elite athletes will use that to monitor their ability to increase stress with someone or not. Now, obviously, you're just dealing with the amount of stress you're going to put someone under. But when you're very chronically ill, like she was, to a point where she lost the ability to leave her house, she needed to use some kind of HRV software to figure out how many blocks from her house she could go. So for about 3 years, she was scoring at what's called 10 points on her HRV monitor. She could not get, her best day would be 10. Okay. Within 3 days of implementing some of these chemistry changes, her HRV was at 100. Okay, so that would be a 10x from making some chemical changes. And then she felt great, and she was able to go and she was able to see more patients and run her business because that was a primary chemical issue. So that could be a chemical issue. It could be a bioenergy issue, but sometimes it can just be really chemical. Now, a lot of times we talk about nutrition, and there are lots of different nutrition approaches, and there's not one that's just right for everyone, because part of it really determines on what you can process, what you can't process, how much you can digest, how much you can absorb, your lifestyle. There's lots of things that go into it. Okay, so just like but there is something that is very true about this. Okay, and I want you to think about it, is that there are no Oompa Loompas in your body, which means that if you don't give it certain nutrients, you cannot run certain processes. Now, the body is super smart. So imagine right now, it's the apocalypse. Everything stops working. No, that doesn't happen. There's just no new stuff. Factories aren't running. There's no new products. You have to go and get everything you own to work by hunting somewhere in the city and plugging something in so you can get normal function of your devices. That is what your body does. So you could stop eating certain things for a long period of time, and you wouldn't really notice too many problems until it becomes so exhausting for your body to go all the way to downtown Tacoma, scavenge and get something so it can get a little bit of power, so it can cook a little bit of meat, so it can eat a little bit of food, that people really start running into issues. Okay, so that's what you want to think about when it comes to chemistry. Just a basic thing is that there is a very specific science to how cells function. And if you understand how that works, cell structure, cell potential, cell energy, all of that has and requires different things in the body. And you don't have any Oompa Loompas. So no matter how spiritual you are, you still need them. Okay. So we've covered those three. So the fourth one we're going to cover, and this one is a really interesting one because it is bridged. So if you notice kind of a pattern here. So the first was that there's a bioenergy problem that creates other problems that could be primary, but it will have secondary problems. There is a physical problem that can create secondary problems too, can't it? So you could have a physical problem, let's say in the gallbladder, and then you have real issues with the gallbladder, or you could have physical problems through the cord, spinal cord, and then you're going to have issues with the organs because all of that signal is dumping into these. So all these problems can stack with different problems. So the other problem you can actually run into is an imbalance. And this is really, really prominent in people that are actually do not know the right things to eat, is the brain actually doesn't have enough nutrients to run processes. And so the body, the brain is just way more sensitive, especially if you have any kind of these chemical poisonings that we talked about earlier from infections. So then what happens is the brain is not as fast at dealing with issues. So you really have two kinds of and I wouldn't even call these mental, these are software issues. So if you think about like straining, like, oh, this bone gets bent, that is a physical hardware issue, but you have software of the brain too. Now you have the software of the belief system, which we talked about earlier, which is almost more in the bioenergy realm. You have the software in the way that it interfaces with the hardware, which is really more in the treatment realm, okay? So there are two kind of big categories that can exist, okay? And you can think about it like this, you have the ones through the spinal cord, which are reflex based. So what that means is if there was a nail on the floor and you're about to step on that nail, your body doesn't really have time when you feel that poke to send a signal all the way up to the brain, talk to your hippocampus, your memory center, and say, oh my gosh, that is a nail. I'm about to stick that thing straight through my foot. Instead, it will do a twitch reaction. It will pull away from that sharp pain. Your body has that because that is a protective mechanism. It's designed to help you survive. But when there is too much signal going to the spinal cord, you can easily overload that, and then you create a problem in the software of the body from a spinal level, okay? So that would be one kind of software issue you can have. Now, the second kind of software issue you can have is you can have an issue in the actual syncing of the brain. So how does this happen? So you wanna think about your lights in your house, okay? If you have lights on a dimmer and the dimmer wasn't controlled, you could continue to turn that light up past any level you want, and it would just pop. So when people are exposed to certain stressors, the software, which is the amount of output that is actually being sent, you can do what's called overclock it. So in computers, they have lock settings. If you know certain buttons, you can enter the lock settings and you can actually override the manufacturer's settings. Well, guess what? You're in charge of your body, so it's very easy to do that. And depending on what's going on with you, you can overclock those settings, and then you will actually have what's called glandular dysregulation. Now, this is something that I think is really like great to know about yourself, but there are four, and you can write this down, there are four basic hormone types that a body needs to have proper metabolics, which means that everybody, doesn't matter who you are, you will have one kind of dominant hormone production style, okay? Now, in order to function well, there is one, if you're releasing a certain kind of hormone, you're going to experience certain things in your body, right? We can understand that because hormones, they dictate a lot of mood. Two, you're going to have a certain shape to your body because hormones, a lot of those are growth hormones. And three, you're going to have a certain kind of behavior to your brain. Okay, so that's important to understand. So these four different kinds of hormone regulations, they will actually dictate kind of the build that you have, the stresses you can tolerate, and the behaviors and emotions you need in your life if you want to stay optimal. If you push too much pressure on that hormone, so let's say I'm here and I am an anterior pituitary type, and I would like to give this conversation an hour, but I've got so much information that I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to cram this in, and I really need 2 hours, but I only got an hour, so now I'm stressed the entire time. Okay, someone that is an anterior pituitary hormone, they release a lot of stress hormone to the brain, which means they are constantly stressed, constantly anxious. They're the kind of people, oh, they had a stressful thought, oh, can't go to sleep anymore. It's over for them, okay? Because as soon as that pathway gets lit up, they are done, okay? So if you know that about yourself, you'll have to optimize your lifestyle to make sure that you're not constantly frying your hormone. So what happens if you fry out your dominant hormone style? Well, this is where people really get in trouble. So if they do not make that adjustment based off how the hormones have an impact on their body, it goes from being more of a chemical problem to a physical problem. So the area that that gland is producing, that will then start to create some locking. When that locking happens, there's a disconnection from the body's efficiency to be able to use that. And then what you run into is an imbalance in the brain, the hormones, and the glands. And that opens the door to a whole subset of other issues inside the way that the body is running what's called homeostasis. So homeostasis is just the ability for your body to keep you alive. It's trying to keep everything the same. So it needs the ability to regulate temperature. It needs the ability to think. It needs the ability to help you breathe based off the situation that's in there. It has to modulate your blood pressure. It has to modulate your blood sugar. So all of these things have to be managed by what? The autonomic nervous system, the brain, okay? And it speaks to all of these glands. So if you don't have that running in sync, you lose the ability to handle homeostasis. And that is when some people get into really bad situations when they're like, oh my gosh, like, I seem to be a hot mess all the time. And it's like, oh, I'm so stressed, I can't even handle anything. And I ate that and my stomach exploded. Well, that could be a problem with the way that the brain is able to handle this. I'm going to share this specific case study where I had someone and she had a lot of trauma. Okay, she was kidnapped when she was in her 20s. Someone tried to kidnap her and rape and kill her. And she threw herself out of the moving truck to save her life and smashed her spine. So about 30 something years later, she has all the emotional trauma. She has all the physical trauma. She's on more pain meds than you know what to do with. And they're monitoring her for addiction. And guess what? That software is all messed up because there's been chemical substances, there's been lots of pain, there's been surgery, there's been lots of compensation, there's been a lot of hormonal stress to keep her alive for the last 30 years. And then her job is fairly stressful. So when she came to me, the first thing I was like, wow, okay, cool, lots of things, let's try a few things, and realized really fast that she had not a single position she could be in that she wasn't in excruciating pain. Just a matter of time. Now, some of that was surgical implants, but it didn't matter what it was. One of the things that we really focused on was the software that should regulate everything. So treated the software that should regulate everything, didn't really need to treat anything physical, and the body regulated itself, and she was able to find comfortable positions and use the toilet by herself again, and these normal functions came back. Now, that would be an example of the brain being under too much pressure and the software being off. Okay, and that would be a primary problem for that person and that situation. Okay, so go over the four imbalances. You have the bioenergy, the energy of the person, the belief systems, the situations they keep enrolling themselves in that are not really compatible or conducive for health. You have the real physical strains that can exist. Okay. You have the chemical situations, infections that can exist because of other issues, or maybe just not knowing enough about how to take care of yourself and keep everything operating. And then you have the software of the brain. Okay, now we've said all of this, and you may notice that we haven't even mentioned exercise. So how important is exercise? So now we have to really split it. So we have talked about four imbalances, and everything that we do in life, there are two things that you have to think about. So the first thing is this active or is this passive? Okay, so here's the difference. And in therapy, we think about it like this. If you come and I treat you, that is a passive process. You lay on the table, I do something, a manipulation, you are at ease, the thing happens to your body, you get up, yeah, it feels great, awesome, whatever. Now, the issue with that is how do you do that yourself? Kind of an issue. Okay, and this is one of the reasons why I educate my clients how to read their own blood work, because if they don't know how to read it, how are they supposed to know how well they're doing? How are they supposed to know that they're eating something that is causing an issue? How are they ever going to go, you know what, I'm probably drinking too much, and that's a really simple sign, or I'm under too much stress, maybe I'm just training too hard and my liver enzymes are just skyrocketing. So you have to have an active role in anything that you do around your health. So exercise is an active role of connecting with your body and doing it. Now, there are times I had a young man that he was a trainer, he owned his own gym, he had studied with some really great trainers, and he had an issue, okay? And the issue was really simple, is he actually broke his patella. So he shattered it into a bunch of pieces. And by the time they surgically repaired that and he got it out, he needed some physical treatment. But as he got older and older, he ran into all these weird issues with his body to a point where he's like, I can't work out anymore, and I'm in excruciating pain if I do. So I went, that's really interesting. Let's go to my gym and take a look at what you're doing. And I looked at him and watched him exercise and realized he was recreating his pain with every single movement. And part of it is he just really didn't understand where tension should be and where tension shouldn't be. Okay. So there is an active form of taking care of yourself. So let's talk about all the active forms, because you have four imbalances. What is your responsibility? What's maybe a little bit harder? Now, at the end of the day, it's your body, which means you have ownership of that body, which means you're the person that is going to decide how healthy that body is. Now, I grew up with a doctor. My dad's fantastic, and he gave me certain foods. And you know what? Those foods didn't really serve me, and I had to make that call myself. I had to make those changes myself, and you're going to have to make those calls yourself about what you need. So no one can tell you. Now, if you let yourself be someone who is always told, what you'll lose is the ability to actually know from your own experience how to take care of yourself. And that is what runs people into a lot of issues. So we're going to talk about the actives and the passive. I know we're winding up here, but this is probably the most important part of our lesson today. So you have the active and you have the passives. Okay. So the active things that you do is you educate yourself about your body. You learn to feel your own bioenergy in the body and how that is doing. You have a practice for that. There's lots of different practices you can do, but you have to have some kind of practice for that. Otherwise, how do you tell if you're aligned or if you're living in a way that actually honors any beliefs that are healthy for you? Very difficult. So you need to have an active part of that. Okay. You learn to move your body in a way that if you're checking with your body, you go, this is good for my body. There's a difference between exercising where you go, okay, like I pushed my body, and there's a difference between pain. Most people do not know the difference because they've never had the first part experience. And I had a young man I was working with, and he did some exercise, and I modified his formula, and he goes, oh my gosh, I did squats with a bar on my back. And that's the first time I did not hurt my back and feel like that was in my back. Now, he had been training really hard, and he actually had a belief that his back was supposed to hurt after every time he lifted. And he thought that's what it should feel like because that was his only reference for it. So you have to teach yourself new reference points. So really your active job, whether it's looking at your health markers, whether you're going to use HRV or you're going to use blood work, or you're going to check in with your body, or you're going to exercise, is teach yourself an experience to set a bar of what is going to be healthy for you. So that is the active part of what you need to do. Now, how do you learn that? Well, oftentimes someone has to introduce you, okay? They have to introduce you to that. That would be the passive part. So it's like, okay, this is what it feels like when your glands are out. This is what it feels like when you're in an environment where that doesn't resonate with you. This is actually what it feels like when you're having a reaction to food. This is what it looks like in your stool when you're having a bacterial infection. Those are things that someone else is going to have to show you at first so you can take care of yourself. And then your goal, really, your journey is to learn how to be more active in your own health journey. And that's really what we teach people at Beometry. So we got a couple minutes. I think I left about 3 exactly. Does anybody have any questions, any aha moments, anything that they would like to ask, mention, or bring up here when we have 3 minutes? And you can either unmute yourself and ask it, or you can type it into the chat box.
I'm going to check the Facebook Live chat, see if we have any questions there. Looking good. So if anyone watches the Facebook Live or the YouTube of this video afterwards, how can they reach you on the website or just give you all a call?
Yeah, that is a great question. Thanks for asking that, Elizabeth. Probably the best way to reach us, if they're watching this live, I will give them the number. They can text this number, and one of our coaches will get in touch with them, okay? And this is not the number that's on the website. So I'm going to put this actually in the chat for everyone if they want this.
And Andy said, I had a lot of aha moments throughout this class. So did I. I took a lot of good notes, and yeah, you have to, you know, it's like weaving a basket. There's many parts that that is your base of your health, and it's all interlinked.
Yeah, I just put that into the text. So the number is 253, because I know the chat won't be on the Facebook Live, 226-0781. And you can just text back to balance, okay? And she'll know that's from the Marlene's class, and she'll know it's related to the balance. Someone said this whole class was aha moments. Definitely be texting this chat. Yeah, please do, Victoria. And that is Andy's actually started working with Coach Bree. So Bree's one of the coaches at Beometry, and we have a lot of different specialists at Beometry because this is a combined approach. There's a lot of different ways you can heal the body. You do have to do a little bit in all four, and you usually have to find the priority for it. Okay, and this is why a lot of people have really struggled with sickness, and I've had a lot of really interesting experience with my own sickness, which is why I've had to go find answers. But it's really about identifying, okay, what is the actual priority here? And do I have some kind of intervention that is going to make that better? We don't have time to get into it to talk about cause and effect or to get into how to find priority today. But that is what, if you're watching this and you're like, hey, okay, I'm resonating with this message, then what you can do is you can text back to balance to that number 253-226-0781. And Coach Brianna, she's fantastic. She will get on a call with you and she'll hear what's going on in your experience, and she'll give you an idea of which of these imbalances is a likely priority for you. Okay. And if you get on this call, you do not have to purchase a program or do anything with us. Our goal really is to help you get clear on which of these imbalances you need some support. And sometimes we'll have people come to us and they'll engage us and we'll do work with them. And sometimes they engage someone else, and that's perfect. We just want you to be able to get some clarity around what it takes for you to get back to balance.
Perfect. Oh, Robin asked, would love to teach about the blood markers.
Oh yeah, I see his note here. Love how you teach the blood markers. Yeah, so blood markers, I mean, it's so important. I think, the nice thing about blood work in America is a lot of times you can't get that very often for insurance. And I do recommend everybody for their yearly physical, they get blood markers. Now, a lot of times people that come to me with issues, they don't have any blood work. So then we have to go order it for them privately, which we have a way of doing, but it's actually more helpful if they have a history of blood work. Now, you can get really optimal in your life, but it does not necessarily mean that you're always going to have the same ranges as other people because you have a different genetic tendency, which means you want to learn what your highs and your lows really look like and maybe what you need to do to support that. It's also really interesting if you take someone and let's say you were doing blood work, and this is more common with people that have chronic diseases, chronic inflammation, where the doctor is monitoring. We got a lot of clients where that's the situation. So they pull that blood work every single month, and you can literally look at the levels and see what they're going through in their life based off those blood work analysis. And it's very, very helpful. I see that. And if you know how to read that and you know how to look at that, it can teach you so much about the nutrients that you need, the processes that may or may not be running. And also, I learned a ton about, I used to drink 3 kombuchas a day, thinking like, oh yeah, I read something about probiotics being really great for you. Had no idea that if you were fermenting sugar with bacteria, that it was going to be a nightmare for yeastic candida. And then you could get an infection in your colon, and then you're going to have an itchy butthole, couldn't figure out why I was having that. So there's so much that you can learn from blood markers, but also about how to take care of yourself. Once again, that's really, you may need some passive guidance on how to read and interpret those, but it's really up to you after that to be really active in the way that you treat your nutrition and understanding really what your body needs and how really you need to rotate it. I think that's probably the most surprising thing that a lot of people don't realize because of bodybuilding culture, especially as personal trainers, is, oh, if I eat the same thing every day, it's going to be really easy. Well, if you don't really understand how IgG works and IgE works, that's basically the body's immune system for dealing with things, and you don't understand how enzymes work and realize like that is a really easy way to live life, but it's not necessarily going to be the best thing for your body. So, if you're listening to this and you haven't really thought about that before, I would definitely encourage you to do a little research on that.
That's such a very valid point about food rotation because, our gut gardens need that diversity and eating with the seasons. And I actually brought this up with my boyfriend and a partner, and he he's a personal trainer and also just graduated from PLU in exercise science. And he was like, well, yeah, I've been eating the same thing, but now I'm starting to get gut issues. And I'm like, we got to rotate some things out. And then sure enough, all was well again.
Right. That's so cool. Like, and you were able to help him, and he probably thought, and this is my experience too, is a lot of us, we think we're doing the 100% right thing. oh my gosh, I'm doing everything I should. So we don't even look at what we're doing. We just keep looking at other things like maybe it's the protein powder, maybe it's the protein, maybe it's the sweetener in the protein powder. And it's like, oh, maybe you just shouldn't eat egg whites every morning because that's high in albumin, like things like that. It's interesting. I don't know if you've had a presenter come and talk about it, but like fermentation time of food is a big one for a lot of people. So like
Yes.
how fast does that food ferment? That's going to impact certain kinds of bacteria. So if you have certain kinds of overgrowth, you definitely want to be looking at speed of fermentation time, which is something most people, it's like, oh yeah, asparagus, really good because it's green. Broccoli, really good because it's green. Like, maybe not.
Yeah, exactly. We've actually never had anyone speak on that.
Mm.
That would seem like a really important topic and very interesting.
All right. Yeah, that would be a really important one, maybe think about next year because I've seen a lot of people, eat a lot of asparagus. Myself too. Asparagus, it's like very easy. It's very kind of inexpensive for the amount of food you get. You throw it in the oven, olive oil, salt, pepper. And I actually gave myself an overgrowth issue doing that.
Oh no.
Yeah, so I see that probably like 5 out of 10 cases of overgrowth. So it's not an uncommon thing.
Oh yes, definitely. Yeah. And um it like you said, it's like if we do too much of a good thing, it becomes too much of a good thing.
Right. Yeah. And, depends on what someone has, that could be a good thing for them and maybe not a good thing for someone else. So, it's really learning your own body that really helps give people freedom.
How do you feel about blood type diets and kind of basing it off of the digestive bioavailability?
Hmm. Yeah, I've looked a little bit into those. I have seen some people like the metabolic typing and things like that. So just where I'm at currently in that is when I look at most people that come to me and they actually have a problem, they have multiple layers of different kinds of infections, which means that at that point, I have to worry less about what the body likes and more so about how to get rid of an infection. So my list of actual foods I can give someone is really small. Because let's say you have, yeast and candida, your list looks like this. Now, let's say you have H. pylori nagrium bacteria looks like this. Let's say you have a parasite, it looks like this. So if you have 3 infections, what are we going to give you? Well, the list is super small and there's only a few safeguard things. And that's really where I tend to find most of the people that are coming to me with those problems. That's really more so what we end up looking at rather than like, what is their body kind of like naturally? We'd have to get them through all these layers of GI issues and infections before we can focus on that more. So that's just what I see clinically in my practice. But if you're working with people that don't have any GI issues and don't have any infections, you probably do more so of that metabolic blood type work.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, totally, Elizabeth. Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Oh yes, definitely. You and everyone down at Beometry, y'all are making a huge impact in the community, and cannot thank you enough for this opportunity tonight. And I know that everyone else was very thrilled about it too.
Well, thank you. Well, you're making a huge impact in the community too with all the education that you're bringing to people that have a desire to get healthy. And not only is it great because it's at no cost, people can go back, they can listen to it. There's just, there's no way they can't be healthy with the way that you're providing all these resources. So thank you for doing that.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you and the Beometry team for being a part of it. And definitely looking forward to more 2023 classes with y'all.
Yes, I'll look forward to it too. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Yay!
Thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. Take good care.